Welcome back to the live webinar here from BINA. This week's topic is the death penalty in Torah's view. How does Torah look at giving somebody capital punishment, the death penalty? We began this discussion on Monday. Let's recap. First of all, the death penalty is in Torah. Torah punishes certain crimes, which parenthetically can be between man and a man or between man and a god, certain very serious crimes, very serious transgressions with capital punishment. That's the fact. Now let's put that fact into context. So we discussed, first of all, what is morality? What is moral? Who decides what is moral and what isn't? Based on what do we decide this? So sure, hopefully, us as normal human beings, hopefully in our mind and in our conscience, we feel that it is terribly wrong to kill an innocent person. And we would never be able to bring ourselves to do that at all. However, we cannot rely on that. We cannot rely on human intellect or human conscience to make that decision. There has been times when people have challenged that premise, and not thousands of years ago, we're talking about in very recent history, where it became the norm to kill and murder innocent human beings. Therefore, we need that our morality should be based on a God who is transcendent from human intellect or human emotions or even human consciousness. That He alone decides what is bad, what is good, what is moral, and what is immoral. And therefore, since it is God that decided that killing an innocent human being is immoral, therefore, God alone can make an exception that if somebody has transgressed such a serious crime, we can punish him with the death penalty. However, as we discussed on Monday, we need to be 100% sure that this is God's will, this is God's desire in this specific case. Just killing someone in the name of God doesn't make it right or moral. In fact, it could be even worse. We have to be 100% sure that this is the exact case that God meant, that killing somebody is the unfortunate but right thing to do. We discussed that there is a very complex system, that only a certain type of court and only certain judges are eligible to be on that court that can actually give the death penalty to another person. So far, we have discussed which judges are eligible to be on that court. Number one, there has to be at least one judge on the court which has what's called smicha, that means a tradition dating back directly from Moses to his disciple, all the way to this judge. In order for any court to give the death penalty, there has to be a high court near the temple situated on Temple Mount, which obviously we do not have today, which is the reason why death penalty has been abolished from temple times all the way until today. The judges themselves have to be totally righteous. They have to have great wisdom. They have to have fear of sin. They have to have hatred towards evil and love towards truth. They have to have love of other people and have a good name. To be on the high court, you need to have children. The reason for that is because someone who has children, that makes the person more merciful and more kind and more thoughtful about another human being. We also mentioned that a king, the Jewish king of that time, was not actually allowed to be part of the high court, because once the king expresses his opinion, it is forbidden for anybody to argue with the king. That would be corrupt judgment, that everyone just agrees with what the king says. Therefore, in order to keep the court 100% honest, and everyone should feel free to express their true and honest opinion, the king was forbidden to be a part of the court. So in summary, what's very important to understand is what type of court we're talking about. We're not talking about barbarians, corrupt people, which are out to kill people and just love doing such things. Rather, we're talking about serious, honest, righteous people who are driven by one thing and one thing only, fear of God, and trying their best to uphold His laws. Now let's get more specific. How would they decide to give somebody the death penalty? What would be the process? And the truth is, it is a very complicated process. Such a complicated process, in fact, as we will soon see, it hardly actually happened that the Jewish court should give the death penalty to another person. First of all, circumstantial evidence is not considered evidence when it comes to capital punishment. You can have all the circumstantial evidence in the world, but we will not kill somebody, we will not punish somebody with death based on circumstantial evidence. There has to be two qualified, and to be qualified is complicated, and there's a lot of laws involved in that. Two qualified witnesses that come and testify that they saw that this person committed this and this crime. What qualifies to be a witness is a separate discussion. All I can say is that there are many qualifications. The witnesses needed to have warned the suspect right before he performed this forbidden act. And not only warn him, but tell him of the punishment. The suspect has to answer back to the witnesses, not only nodding his or her head, not only saying, I know, but actually saying, I am going to do this, I am about to perform this sin, and I will get this punishment. Meaning fully acknowledging that I am aware of what I'm doing and what the consequences of what I'm doing is. So that's pretty complicated. There has to be a specific type of warning. In the warning has to include the punishment. The person who committed the crime has to acknowledge to the witnesses that I have heard the warning and I know it and I'm doing the sin anyway, even though I'm going to get punishment. This warning has to be said within a few seconds, what's called in halachic terminology, toich kedei dibur, of saying the three words, Shalom Alecha Rebbe, peace upon you, O teacher. At the time it takes to say those words, the warning has to be in the proximity of the crime that was committed. If the crime was committed after a couple of seconds that the warning was given, the warning is invalid and does not fit the criteria to punish this person with the death penalty. If a few seconds have passed, the witnesses have to repeat the warning with the punishment inside of it, and the person has to re-acknowledge that I have heard the warning and I know and I'm doing it anyway. If all of this actually happened, which is very unlikely, but if it happened and the witnesses come and say to the court that all the above conditions have been met, then the court gives the witnesses a very stern warning. They give them a drasha. They tell them, do you know what you're about to do? Do you know that based on your testimony, we can end up killing somebody? This is not just a monetary case that if you're right, this person has to pay $50 or $100. We're talking about killing another human being, which means that you're not only killing him or her, you're killing their descendants and their descendants until the end of time. Every person is precious, they tell the witnesses. Every person is created as if they are the only person in the world, and therefore if one person is lost, it's as if we have lost the entire world. They tell the witnesses, do you know that if you're wrong and we find out that you're false witness, you will get the punishment that you want to give to this person? That is the law of false witnesses. The witnesses, after hearing all of this, might be scared off and say, forget it, we don't want to give our testimony. If they are 100% convinced in the truth of their testimony, they say, no, we are ready to give our testimony. Then they go through a thorough examination process where each witness is taken separately to a different place and each one is examined separately to make sure that all the facts fit, it all makes sense, and they're each saying exactly the same story. The laws of checking witnesses are also very complex and very complicated, and that's for another time. If all of this went through, and now we know the facts based on these two qualified witnesses, the judges then sit down and as we said, it has to be at least 23 judges. The High Court was 71 judges, was 70 yet, and they have to decide and convene and rule what the sentence is for this person. If the majority of them find the leniency, we go after the majority, and the person leaves totally innocent. If the majority comes out that this person indeed is liable to is sentenced to get the death penalty, then they don't get the death penalty right away. The court has to sit for a full day. They don't drink any wine, they eat as little as possible, and they split up into pairs and they examine the case thoroughly, that maybe they can find the leniency. We see one direction here. The direction is that we don't actually want to give the death sentence. We do all we can to find a way out. If after all of this they reconvene the next day and everybody still keeps to their original opinion, and so it comes out that the majority of the court says that this person should be sentenced to death, then and only then the person gets the death penalty. On the day that the person is getting killed, it is not a day of celebration at all. The court has to fast, they have to be in mourning. It is a terrible, sad day that another Jew, another person, is being killed. The Talmud tells us that if a Jewish court gives somebody the death penalty, one person, once in 70 years, that court is considered a bloody court with blood on their hands. Which, from that saying of the Talmud, we come to see that once in 70 years, one time the death penalty was considered very unlikely, and if they did it, they were considered a court with blood on their hands. I just want to give to you an interesting statistic, which with an interesting calculation. In the USA today, there are 318 million people approximately. That is the approximate population. Since 1976, there have been 1,437 executions. The times that people have been given the capital punishment. If you round that up per year, which is not exact because every year was different, but if you round it up per year, it comes out that 35 people were executed since 1976 till today per year. If you figure that out, if you round this all up, it comes out that 1 in every 10 million people are killed every year via the death penalty. How many Jews are there today? There are 16 million Jews approximately in the world today. In theory, if we would have a high court today in Israel and we would all be living there and the death penalty would apply, it would be 1 in 16 million Jews less than 1 in 16 million Jews every 70 years. And if it would be 1 in every 70 years, they would be considered a court with blood on their hands. And in America today, it's 1 out of every 10 million every single year. Just to show you the very significant difference of even places where civilized places, normal societies where the death penalty does apply, it is given way more than the high court in Jerusalem would have given it in the time that we were in the land of Israel. Just to end off, so why then does the death penalty apply? If we see that we're not really interested in giving it, then we try every single thing we can that we shouldn't give it. Well, today it doesn't apply at all, but even in days when it did apply, it wasn't given very often, and even once in 70 years was considered crazy. What's the point here? What's the point that we're trying to bring out? The fact that there is a death penalty. And I think that it brings out a very, very important point. Just the concept. It's a concept which is brought out in punishment in general, but the more severe the punishment is, the more it brings out this point. Because a person can ask, I understand that if you kill somebody else and you're a danger to society, maybe then there's an argument to say that that person should be put to death. But just a sin which is in private, a transgression which is done between me and God, why then should I be liable to the death penalty? Who cares? Have I bothered anybody else? And the example which is given about this is, let's say there's an astronaut in space on a space shuttle who decides that he wants to light a match. I'm not bothering anybody, I'm just lighting a match. Well, everybody knows that that match can cause a catastrophe and a destruction to the entire space shuttle. What's very important to realize is that Torah and mitzvahs, fulfilling God's commandments, is not just a nice suggestion and a nice way of life. God's commandments is the way that the world is supposed to be run, and when we don't keep them, we generate evil energy throughout the entire world. And when we do keep them, we generate positive energy throughout the entire world. Every action that every single person does has an effect on the entire world. And therefore, for every single action that I do, I need to be held accountable. If it's a very, very severe crime, maybe even the death penalty. However, just to summarize, as I said, practically speaking, it was hardly ever done. Once in 70 years was considered too much. The concept exists to bring the awareness that every action that I do affects the entire world. And if it's like that in a negative action, how much more so in a positive action? That every positive, even thought, or for sure a word, or even an action that we do positively affects the entire world. Have a good day.